Yeah. Yep.
The RVP Training Center.
Yep. Yeah, because Gerald Reed is one of my upline NSDs.
Okay.
Yep. So.
And you're under. Are you with Jeff Seagraves as well, right?
Yeah. I'm direct to Jeff. Yep.
Okay. And then Jeff under Gerald?
Yep. He's a second to Gerald. So yeah. Yep.
The RVP Training Center. Wow.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. All right, sweet. I just got YouTube going, so we will let these couple people in. I have 3 people sitting at my table also that are at my house right now. So they may or may not, like Elliot has his camera on me right now, but and then Taylor's right here, and then we have one other person casting for us. So sweet. Well, guys, hey, thanks for hopping on. I know some of you guys like just won this like 45 minutes ago by setting a couple appointments today. Some of you guys won this about a month ago. But Tyler's become a great friend of ours in the business. And I'm really excited for you guys to hear just his story and what he's doing right now. They're on a run for ownership. So he's a near $300,000 earner, guys. That's a big deal. He's about to get ownership and lock that down for his family, which is awesome. He's got 7 vice presidents. One's your brother, right?
Yeah. Yep.
One of them is his brother, which I'm sure we'll hear about that a little bit. I'm sure that's part of the story, right? And then he's in Indiana. He said he worked out of the office here in Tampa, the RVP Training Center as well. So yeah, Tyler, I won't take up any more of your time, man. Thanks for jumping on here. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, first of all, thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate it. And, anytime someone asks us to pour into their team, obviously we're super grateful to be able to do that because as you will learn, as you guys become regional vice presidents and you build a team, you just get where you're pretty selective on who you are going to pour in right into your people because awesome thing about Primerica, there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat. You just can't try to do it every single way at the same exact time. That gets pretty messy. Okay. So we appreciate it and we don't take it lightly. So thank you so much for having us on. But yeah, guys. So real quick. So Dan basically just kind of asked me to share with you my story and then also just some advice on, what I did whenever I went RVP and what I would be doing and what I'd be focused on. So what I'm going to kind of do is I'm going to tell my story about going RVP. And I'm just going to kind of basically kind of weave my points in between it and kind of hit some real big takeaways. Okay. So first of all, just so you kind of know how long I've been in the business. So I got recruited in August of 2009. So I've been in the business for 13 years now. Like Dan said, we've been super fortunate to where we now have 7 vice presidents. So we have 4 first, 2 seconds, and a 3rd generation. We're should have another 2nd generation getting promoted this month. So, we're just on a tear right now. We got like 350 licensed agents. But, listen, that didn't happen overnight, right? I showed up just like every single one of you all by myself, not having a clue what I was doing. Okay. So how did I get started? So kind of how I got introduced to Primerica was I live up here in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm born and raised in Southern Indiana. Grew up on a farm, so I've always had a really good work ethic. And I wasn't looking for Primerica. Primerica found me. Okay. And I think that's a big key because a lot of your best people, whenever you talk to them, it's just going to make sense. Okay. To me, there was no convincing me, I literally recruited myself. So I'll tell you that here in a second. Okay. But that's been really the same way for every single one of my best people, every single one of my VPs. They were some of the easiest recruits we've ever gotten because it just made sense to them. Right. And so I wasn't looking for Primerica, but I had a very specific goal I wanted with my life. Right. So I knew what I wanted my life to look like. I knew I wanted to do something where I could have a ton of flexibility, ton of freedom, control my schedule, be my own boss because, I grew up on a farm and I saw my dad be self-employed. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And so, me and my siblings played a ton of sports. My parents never missed a game ever. And that was a big deal to me. And I didn't want to have to miss my kids' stuff. So I wanted that freedom of time I saw that my parents had. But I also wanted to be able to make really good money because my parents ran a really small farm, was not a huge money maker. And then if any of y'all are from the Midwest, we get all 4 seasons in a week a lot of times, which is why Dan left Michigan for Tampa. Okay. And so
very accurate.
Yeah. And whenever we, so my parents, right, their income was based on the weather. So we had a lot of really tough years and we struggled financially. We took 2 family vacations the entire time I grew up. Right. So there's just a lot of stuff that we weren't able to do. And I wanted to be able to go travel. I wanted to be able to have a nice house. I want to be able to do big things. So I knew I wanted to make big money, but I also wanted to do something where I could help people. You know, I'm a huge people person. I wanted to do something where I could impact people's lives. And so I grew up in the middle of nowhere. My hometown is so small, it didn't even have a stoplight. And so the only people I saw that did that were the doctors that ran their own private practices. And so basically, you know, I said, okay, I'm going to go try to do that. So I was very blessed to be pretty good at school. And so I got a full ride academically to college, moved up here to Indianapolis, and I was a pre-med student going down my little way, right? Because if most of y'all are like me, I was taught growing up, you go to school, get good grades, bust your butt so you can go to college, get good grades, right? Why? So you can get a degree and eventually make money, right? And so that's what I was doing. Well, then my sophomore year of college is when the recession hit back in 2008, 2009. Dropped a bomb on the healthcare industry with the Affordable Care Act. And so here I am getting to the point in my career where I got to start like taking the MCAT. I got to start applying to medical schools. And so I just start interviewing a bunch of doctors because like nobody knows what the healthcare field's going to look like. I'm like, hey, like, should I do it? Should I do it? Should I do it? And after talking to like 10 plus doctors, every single one of them, Luke said, don't do it, Tyler, run away. Do not get anywhere near the healthcare industry. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to do that now. Right. And so I had a biochemistry degree I was working on literally just to cover the prereqs, wanted nothing to do with that. And so I was like, well, great, now what? And so luckily, you know, I was in a Bible study at the time, and I had a buddy of mine that got recruited into Primerica, and I was in the Bible study, and he's like, and so I was, you know, and he had lost his job during the recession. And so he was like, you know, we'd kind of been praying for him to find something. So he shows up to our small group one week. He's like, yeah, man, I found something. I was like, dude, tell me about it. And so he just starts telling me about Primerica. And he's like, are you familiar with Dave Ramsey? I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I love Dave Ramsey, all this stuff. And so by the end of the conversation, I literally asked him, Morgan, I was like, hey, can I come do that with you? Right. So imagine having your recruits do that, right? That'd be pretty fun, right? So I literally I'm like, hey, will you recruit me? Okay. And so that was whenever I was 19 years old. And so I get started, okay, and I would love to tell you I got off to a blazing fast start, but it took me a year to become a district leader, okay, so that is not the path you want to take, okay, because no joke, like if you're new, you want to try to go get to district division leader like as fast as you possibly can, because 80% of all people who go RVP in our company, they make it to district leader within their first 6 to 8 weeks. Okay. Now I just happen to be one of the rare 20%ers. Okay. So I did not get off to a fast start, right? I wasn't looking for Primerica. Primerica just found me at the right time, and I knew what I wanted, and I saw that I could get there with this. Okay. And so I didn't get off to a fast start, but my RVP did a couple good things. He just treated me really well. Now this is back when we did everything in person. So I loved coming to the office. I loved the environment. You know, he didn't spend any time with me because I didn't deserve it, but he just treated me really well. And the couple things I did right was I did a few appointments that year because I had to get to district, right? And I sat down with my mom and dad. Okay, they were the first people I ever sat down with. And again, my dad, you know, runs our family farm, bust his butt, right? That's why it's never been weird for me to work nights, work weekends, work holidays, because I saw my dad do that my entire life. Okay, like that was just normal. Okay, but I found out that my dad had been sold a $50,000 whole life policy by Northwestern Mutual. Okay, well, just so y'all know, if you don't know anything about farming, it's crazy expensive. So my dad, he grew soybean and corn, like literally just to buy the seeds to plant for just the soybeans, that cost more than 50 grand a year. So like if my dad would have passed away and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, no income, and only got 50 grand, she literally would have lost everything. And so we were able to get him $500,000 of coverage for the exact same price. Right. And so boom, first thing Crusade got to me. Second person I sat down with was my grandma. About 8 months before I got started in the business, my grandpa had passed away. You know, they were super old school. He handled all the money. And so when he passed away, after sitting down with her to do a training appointment, I found out that all of their money was with Edward Jones. And this is during the recession, right? So if your income is only based on investments like Edward Jones people are, and the market drops by 50%, what happened to her investment advisor's income? It dropped by 50%. And so he sat down with her and said, hey, Mary Lou, I want to diversify your portfolio. He sold off all of her mutual funds, and which, by the way, were some of the best performing mutual funds during the recession, sold those off. And he put her all into one mutual fund that charged her 3 times the fee. So he made 3 times the money on it. Those were my first 2 appointments, right? Then my third appointment I did was with my brother, right? My brother and I, like, we'd always talked about like starting a business together, doing something like that. Whenever I got started in the business, he was living in Lexington, Kentucky, moved back up to Indianapolis. So I sat down with him and my sister-in-law, actually had them come out to an op night. I said, hey, you know, I'd love for you to come see what I'm doing. Can you come check it out? He sat through the op. He was like, dude, this is freaking genius, right? Became my first recruit. And then we did his F&A, found out same thing. Like, he had this little $25,000 whole life policy. My sister-in-law had nothing. And so we got like $400,000 coverage on my brother, got coverage on my sister-in-law because she wasn't working, right? And so if my brother would have passed away, same thing, my sister-in-law would have been screwed, right? And so those are my first 3 appointments, okay? So what I would challenge you if you're new is one of the first things you need to do is you need to put your trainer in front of your absolute closest friends and family, right? Because listen, like, if you don't go sit down with them, there's a very good chance those people are getting completely ripped off, and they will never know it unless you go show them, right? And if you think that wouldn't happen, right? Like, I don't care if it's their best friend who's their financial person. You'd be shocked what people do to people, right? And so, like, if you don't go do that, you never know what's going to happen to those people, right? And so the good thing was I got on a few appointments. And so the crusade was in me, right? And that's why Art says, you know, our founder said, like, look, crusaders die hard. Okay, yeah, right. Dan, your best friend sold you a whole life policy, right? Best friend, right? Okay. And so again, right, and like, you just have to know, like, most of the time, like, they have no clue what they're selling. They don't understand how it works, okay? Because they're just trained that it's good, okay? So that was kind of that. So then I stick around, right? Because I love the crusade. I love what we do for people. Every now and then I'd help a client. I'd make $500, right, on a client. And that was good money for a broke college kid at the time. And then my RVP did a great thing, and he got me to my first big event. I went to a big event in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Now, I got recruited in August of 2009. This was in May of 2010, right? So about 8 months later, I get to go to Winston-Salem, and I get to hear Bill Arender, who's one of the he's the original expansion RVP in the company. I got to hear him speak and just talk about, like, really, like, what I had a hold of, okay? And yeah, so you guys have your next big event, May 5th through the 6th there in Tampa. Like, you need to be at that. Okay, because by getting to a big event, right, big decisions happen at big events. And so I got to that event, and I just didn't realize the scope of what I had my hands a hold of, right? And I got to hear this guy who's been in the company for 30 plus years at that point, and what it's done for his family, and how you have the ability here to build a perpetual money machine that if you will take the time, if you'll take 2 or 3 years to bust your butt and build it, this thing will literally pay your family for the next 100 years. Like, that's what you have the ability to build, right? And so I remember, like, sitting there, and, like, I felt like I got struck by lightning. I was like, holy crap, I found it. I didn't realize, it was like, it was like, for me, what happened, Tiana, was like, I realized that, like, I had the keys to a Ferrari, but I didn't realize it. And I was driving it like a Ford Focus the whole time. Okay. And that's whenever I finally got the vision of, like, how big this really was. And that's why big events are such a big deal, y'all, because you can't stretch your own thinking. Okay. And, like, you know, doing a one-on-one, that's awesome, right? Getting on a training like this is cool, right? If you happen to be there local and you go to the RVP training center for an in-person training, there's 100 people there, like, that's really cool, right? But there's just something different about getting to a big event where there's 2,000 people. And the example I always use for people, it's like, you know, it's like the difference between, like, listening to your favorite artists. You know, if you like pull up YouTube, pull up Spotify, and you stream your favorite song, versus going to a concert live and sitting in the front row, right? Do those two even compare in experiences? Absolutely not, right? The energy, the environment, being around like-minded people that love the same artists that you do, right? That's the difference of going to a big event and why you've got to be at them, okay? And so I went to that big event, made the decision, and that's where I mentally planted my flag. Okay. And so I came back, decided to get to work, Dan. But at this point in time, y'all, like, we were doing everything 100% in person, like, doing stuff on Zoom didn't exist. And I had got started in the business 2 hours away from where my warm market was, right? So it just wasn't feasible for me to, like, really talk to my warm market. So I decided to go out, and I decided to start, like, face-to-face, like, cold prospecting strangers, right? And why did I do that? Because I went to a big event, and I heard a story about Andy Young, one of our $1 million earners, who, like, you know, had nothing going on. And so he made a decision, and he went and talked to 800 people in 19 days recruited 15 directs and exploded his business like that way back in the 80s. So I was like, all right, I'm going to try that. So I came back to Indianapolis and I literally went and I like face-to-face talked to strangers saying, hey, you look like a sharp person. Can I get your name and number right? Which is crazy. Okay. I did that for a month and I would talk to 200 people a day for 30 straight days. And at the end of that, I got one recruit who quit the next day. And I literally walked so much that I broke my foot walking, right? Because I'd never walked that much in dress shoes and I got a stress fracture in my foot, right? And so at the end of that, right, I'm like, I've given it everything I've got for 30 days. I'm getting nothing out of it. And I just remember after that month, like I'm broke, I made no money. My fiance at the time, who's now my wife, like she was basically paying our bills, right? So I felt like a piece of crap. And I just remember I had a decision to make, right? Of, okay, like, am I going to stick with this or am I not going to stick with it? And part of my story previously was growing up, like I loved basketball, right? Like my goal was to make it to the NBA. However, I'm 5'10" and white. So that was not working out for me too well. Okay. Because I can't shoot either. Right. So I'm not even one of those white guys that plays basketball, right? I couldn't shoot either. Okay. And so, but I tried walking on the basketball team in college because I was actually pretty good. Okay. All joking aside. And I remember like I tried walking on the team and I didn't make it. And that was my goal. Like that was my dream growing up my whole life. And I'll never forget whenever I got told that I didn't make the team, that I literally went to my dorm room, locked myself in my room and I like bawled my eyes out for 2 days straight. And after that point of realizing I didn't hit that goal and dream, I did not touch a basketball. I did not watch a basketball game for like 5 years because it hurt too bad. And the reason it hurt so bad was because what I realized, Bree, was the reason I didn't make it was not because I wasn't good enough. It's because I hadn't worked hard enough and I didn't give it everything I've got. Like I worked like a maniac the last summer after I graduated high school, between high school and college, before I was going to try to walk on. But if I would have worked like I worked that summer, all 4 years, I would have made it like hands down. It would have been a piece of cake. And so what hurt was I knew I could have, but I didn't give it everything I got. Okay. And so whenever that happened, I made a decision that if I ever had an opportunity to go do something big with my life again, I would never quit without giving it everything I've got. Okay. So now you flash forward. I went through that month of hell, prospecting strangers, right? Okay. And I had a decision to make of was I going to throw in the towel or was I not going to throw in the towel? And I came back to how I felt and that decision I made previously after I didn't make it playing college basketball. And I said, nope, I ain't giving it in, right? Like I will never quit again until I give it everything I've got. Okay. So then we kind of like, now we're going to flash forward a few months. Okay. And so now we get into January of 2011. And at that point in time, my RVP, like we moved into a cluster with some other RVPs, just like Dan's in one in an office with a bunch of RVPs there in Tampa. And there was an NSD that just gave me some great coaching. He's like, Tyler, if you ever want to get things big, you need to always be prospecting multiple ways, have at least 3. That's why, you know, your guys' hierarchy is always taught, you know, you need to have a 5 to stay alive. Okay. So I said, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I've never done this because that time, whenever I was prospecting, that was only 30 days. So I made a decision in January of 2011, Amber, that, you know what, we're always taught you built this thing in 90-day madman cycles. I've never given it 90 days of my absolute best effort continuously. So I'm going to go give this thing everything I've got for 90 days. And I am not going to care what my results are the first 60 days. Right. And so, because what most people do, right, is they say, I'm going to go work really hard and they book a few appointments and nobody shows up and after 2 days, they're like, oh, it doesn't work. Or they might do it for 30 days, or they might do it for 45 days. But there's a reason that like there's a magic in 90 days, right? That's why it's called P90X, not P3X, right? Okay. Because 90 days is long enough to get drastic results, but it's short enough for you to like buy in that you can actually do it. Okay. So I come out of the gates, right? I'm prospect. I'm like working, y'all. I'm talking like morning, noon, and night. I'm talking to everybody I know, right? I'm prospecting multiple different ways. And in January of 2011, I just come flying out of the gates and I do 2 recruits and 0 in premium, right? And so then I'm like, all right, let's learn, right? So then I come back in February, bust my butt again, right? I'm talking like working for another 30 straight days. And in January, in February, I explode and I do 0 by 800 in premium. Now imagine like working your tail off for 60 straight days and that's what you get. Okay. What are most people going to do? They're going to be like, this doesn't work. But I said, no, I made a commitment. I said I was going to do it for 90 days. I'm doing it for 90 days because here's the deal, y'all. Like, what did that say? Did that say that Primerica didn't work? No, that said that Tyler sucked and had no skills. Okay. And I didn't know what I was doing, but what I was doing that whole entire time, man, I was getting my skills up. I was getting good, right? And at the same time, y'all, you have to remember, like, I'm 20 years old and I look like I'm 12 at that point, okay? So, like, I also had that going for me. So I had to be so good that people didn't even ask me my age, right? And that's what I was building that first 60 days, right? And so now, all of a sudden, I keep going. And in March, I meet a guy named Mason McDonald. Okay, I have now been so at this point, I've been in the business since August of 2009. It is now March of 2011. I have never double-digit recruited in a month at this point, okay? But I'm getting my skills up, right? Well, I meet a guy named Mason McDonald. I recruit him, and he had been in sales his whole life. He was from the area, had credibility, right? And I helped him double-digit recruit his first 21 days in the business. So here's another nugget, right? So for some of you that maybe you haven't had the start that you want to have, your story does not have to be your new recruit story, right? Just because it took you a long time. That's why we say, hey, look, you're one recruit away from an explosion, right? Mason was my explosion. Now, if I wouldn't have put the work in that first 60, 70 days before I met him and gotten my skills up, I wouldn't have been ready to go handle Mason, right? But because I'd put the work in, I was self-improving. and I'm talking like, after every appointment I was doing, I was calling my coach. Hey, here's what happened. Here's what worked. What would you have done differently? So I'm like getting a carburetor adjustment after every appointment from my RVP, right? And I recruit Mason. And because I recruited Mason, we went 2 by 0 in January, 0 by 800 in February, and then we did 15 by 6,000 in March. Boom, there's the explosion, right? And so that is what kickstarted my belief in my business, right? And so then we start getting some things moving, right? You know, we're double-digit recruiting most months. And then the next big thing that happened was in July of that year was our international convention. So every 2 years, Primerica does a huge convention. Our next one's next summer. It'll be at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta where the Atlanta Falcons play. They've hosted the Super Bowl there. And I drug my wife to that event because up until this point, we weren't married yet, right? We were engaged, but she was not supportive, which why would she be supportive? I had given her nothing to support. So here's another tip, right? If you have a spouse or significant other, if they are not supportive, go show them the money, right? Go make some money and they get real supportive real fast, okay? My wife now, very supportive, right? Whenever you got, we made almost 40 grand last month. So she's very supportive now. Okay. But I drug her kicking and screaming to the international convention. And that's where she got the vision. Okay. So that's another big key, right? If you have a spouse or significant other, you have got to get them to a big event as well, because at that event, that's where she realized, okay, it's not just Tyler's thing. This is our business. And she saw that all the goals and dreams that she had since she was a little girl, like we could actually go do this thing, right? So now Samantha's on board. And so we make a decision that we're going to go on a run, right? And there was a couple things that happened at that big event, right? At that convention. Number one, my wife got on board, right? So now you have both of us going in the same direction, same vision, okay? Number two is that was the first time they ever did the future jersey, Dan. And the genius thing about it, what they did, Dan, is they had the 150 people that won this future come in for it. And they had the next 150 people that were like the first 150 losers that didn't qualify, but they were like this far away. They invited us to come in and watch the other people get their jersey. So I flew in early and I had to watch 150 people get the jersey because they just kicked my ass. And I made a decision, okay, that I was not going to come back to the next event, which was a Primerica trip in the next February. So 7 months later, that I was not coming back to that event without winning that jersey. Okay. And so I made that decision. And then on top of that, I made a decision that I was not going to miss another month ever without double-digit recruiting, right? I believe that double-digit recruiting is the takeoff speed for your business. Why? Because there's this thing called the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, which says that 20% of your people will always do 80% of your work. So why do you need a double-digit recruit? You go recruit 10 people to find the 2. You're just looking for the 20%ers, right, that actually want to move, because of those 20%, both of them will get licensed. One will let you take them to district, right? And so double digit recruiting basically lets you find someone every month that's going to let you take them to district. And that's where a lot of your production is going to come from, right? And so then we made a decision to double digit recruit. So then we double digit recruited every single month for the rest of 2011, right? And then the next big thing that happened, okay, was now we got some momentum going, right? We're getting leaders, we're writing business, right? We're promoting people. And then in January of 2012, because at this entire time, like, y'all, I'm still kind of part-time, spare time in college. And so I had a decision to make, right? Because I got to a point where the amount of time I was putting into my business was hurting my grades in school, but the amount of time I was putting into my classes at school was hurting my business. And so I had a decision to make. Okay. And a lot of people think this is freaking crazy, right? But I just knew that, like, I needed for me to go get it done and get it across the line for RVP. I just knew, Dan, it was going to require just another level of commitment. And so I made a decision to drop out of college. But not only did I make the decision to drop out of college, but I had a full ride scholarship, right? And those scholarships were good for 10 years. And there was just something that, like, I just knew that if that was in the back of my head, that was my backup plan, that I could always go back for the next 10 years, that I just wouldn't get it done. So not only did I drop out, but I threw my grades and went from getting straight A's to straight F's the next semester. So that way I lost every single one of my scholarships. And so I literally burnt the ships, right? And so for some of you, right, like, every now and then you just need to make a decision to freaking go for it, right? And bet on yours. And why was I willing to do that? Because I knew I was willing to do the work. I was willing to bet on me. Right now, if you're in school, am I saying drop out? Yes, I am, actually. I think it's a complete waste of time and money, okay? Right? But anyways, okay? But the whole point is, right, is that I made that decision, and now all of a sudden, like, I had no money coming in. And then on top of that, my wife, we were living together, right? And then she all of a sudden started her student teaching because she was an elementary education major. Well, as soon as you get into your student teaching section, that means that she didn't have time to work either. So we went from her working, me having scholarships plus income from Primerica, to now the only income was Primerica income, right? And so that happened in January of 2012. Funny enough, right, after that happened, 90 days later, I signed my RVP contract. Right? Why? Because there was no other option, right? It was sink or swim, and this guy was refusing to sink. Okay. And so part of that, right, is you just got to kind of understand, like, man, like, what motivates you and what does it really take, right? And so for me, like, I'm a stick guy, right? There's people that are motivated by carrots, and there's people that are motivated by the stick. I'm motivated by the stick, right? Like, when my back's in the corner and it's sink or swim, like, I'm coming out swinging, okay? And so I had to make a decision that I was going to go make this thing happen, right? And so in that 90 days, we went from having maybe like 10 people showing up at our training to 90 days later. Again, this is when we were doing stuff all in person. We had 40 people showing up every week. We had 35 licensed agents in my team. And we qualified going RVP doing almost 30 by 22,000. And then I gave up 2 fully licensed full-time regional leaders doing 10 by 10 as a replacement. Right. And then that's when we were able to qualify to RVP 2 months after I turned 22. Okay. And we were the first RVPs that my direct upline had ever promoted. Right. So not only did we get it done whenever we were really young, but we got it done, and I'd never seen an RVP be promoted. Right. And so my point of that is okay, what are some of those lessons that you can take away from that? Is that number one, right? You just got to know what you want, right? Like, I knew what I wanted, and I knew I was not willing to settle, and I was not willing to let anything get in my way. Right. And so I just want you to imagine, right? Like, my in-laws, they thought I was freaking crazy, right? Because at this point in time, like, during college, I'd already proposed to my wife. So we're engaged, and they go from like, oh my gosh, our future son-in-law is going to be a doctor, to, oh my gosh, he like dropped out of college. He's a college dropout doing this weird financial business. Okay. And so, but like, I knew that I was willing to bet on me. Right. And so for a lot of you, right, like, the biggest thing is, like, you've got to be your biggest cheerleader. Right. Because at the end of the day, it's between you and God. of whether or not you're going to go get this thing done. Because listen, a lot of times, like you can talk a good game, right? But at the end of the day, right, like you can even like kind of sometimes fool your spouse a little bit, not most of the time, but like, you know, your spouse doesn't know if you've really, or your significant, they don't know if you've made the deep down decision of whether or not you're really going to go do the work, right? And so for some of you, okay, you just need to make a decision to go do the work. And here's what's going to happen, okay? By you making the decision to do the work, what's going to happen is some of you all, like some people, they struggle with where they just don't feel like they deserve to win. They don't know if they're good enough, right? They don't know if they're good enough for people to follow them, right? Well, let me tell you what's going to fix all that. Go bust your butt, right? Because what's going to happen is you go make a decision to go work, and you make a decision to outwork every other person on Dan's team, and like you really go do it. What's going to happen is after you work your tail off like that, like you're showing up early, you're staying late, you're listening to the audios, you're self-improving, you're doing the appointments, you're prospecting people, right? You're dealing with all the ding dongs, right, that we have to deal with, right, in our business, right? Then after a while of you doing that, eventually what's going to happen is a flip is going to switch in your brain, where all of a sudden what happens is you now feel like you deserve it because you know you've paid the price. And you know that if people will just do what you've done the last 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, they are guaranteed to win because you are winning because you put the work in. Okay. And so what helped me, right, is like, you know, I wasn't like, you know, I was a 19-year-old punk college kid whenever I got started. Right. But what helped me was like, I had a ridiculous work ethic. And there was 2 things that I heard really early on in my business that really helped me. Number one was an audio by Jim Rohn. And he said, look, at the end of the day, right, let's say that me and Dan are competing, right? And Dan is just like the best person that's ever been recruited in Primerica. He's God's gift to Primerica. And out of every 10 people he sits down with, he can close 9 of them. And let's say that I'm terrible and I can only close 1 out of 10. Well, if I make a decision to challenge Dan to a competition, I can still beat him. You're like, well, how in the world are you going to beat him? Well, it's really easy. I just have to make a decision. I'm going to go talk to 100 people in the time it takes Dan to talk to 10. He talks to 10, closes 9. I talk to 100, close 10. I win, right? And so if you are willing to outwork your deficiencies, right, you can still win here because Primerica is so dang good, okay? And then the second thing I heard was one of my favorite videos by Will Smith. And he said, look, he's like, at the end of the day, he's like, the reason I've been able to have the success that I have in my acting career is because if you put me on a treadmill next to somebody else, 1 of 2 things is happening. Number 1 is they're getting off that treadmill before me, or number 2, I'm dying on that treadmill because I will never quit before they do, right? And it's just having that kind of a mindset, right? Where it's like, look, I'm willing to go do whatever it takes because I know that the prize is worth it, right? And that's the last thing I want to leave you all with, right? Is that this thing, if you are willing to bust your butt, I believe that anybody, I don't care where you're at, I believe anybody in Primerica can make a decision. And if they make the real decision, you can be an RVP in 6 months or less, right? You can go get that done if you're willing to put the work in. Okay, especially like now that we can use Zoom and like, dude, you can do like 10 times as many appointments today as that I was able to do on my run to RVP. Okay. But then number 2, you just have to realize that, man, like once you go RVP, like you're now officially in the big leagues. Okay. And that you just got to go be willing to bust your butt. And if you just are willing to bust your butt for a couple years, like this thing is guaranteed, right? Like Primerica delivers. Okay. Like, I mean, y'all, like, it's just crazy. Like what this is. And I want to kind of leave you with this is like that. Why do you need to be willing to go do that? Is because this thing is built for you to go get to RVP and then start producing RVPs so that way you can get totally financially free, right? I want you to imagine, like, real quick, okay? I want you to imagine what your life looked like when you have a hierarchy of RVPs that they run and they do their own deal every single day, whether or not you do anything, and that your hierarchy is recruiting 150 plus people a month. You got 350 licensed agents running around all over North America. And anytime any of them help a family, your family gets paid. And because of that, you get to start every month off with a bonus check. Just your bonus check is between $12,000 to $18,000 a month. And then on top of that, you make another 20 grand a month, right? Because that's what you have your hands a hold of, right? And because I was willing to go pay a price when everyone said I was crazy, everyone said I was too young, right? All this different stuff, right? That is now the life that my wife and I get to live, right? Because why? Because Primerica is guaranteed, right? If you work it, it delivers, right? And so because of this, right, like we've been able to let my wife has been able to be a stay-at-home mom. Our kids, I just got back from a parent night at our kids' private school. Like our kids are in a school called Acton Academy up here, right? Where, it's like 20 grand a year for our kids to go to school. And like, if Primerica developed a school, that is what this school is. Like it literally trains them to be like future entrepreneurs. It's like everything I would want out of a school, right? And they get to go to that and they don't have to deal with all the craziness going on in public school, right? Like my wife, and I work from home every day doing this, and like we want to go to lunch, we go to lunch. We want to travel, we travel, right? Like we get to do what we want to do when we want to do it, right? And then on top of that, because we practice what we preach, we're still investing like $4 grand a month right now, right? So I want you to like go to your financial calculator after we're done tonight, and I want you to go put in your age for the next 20 years at $4,000 a month at 9% and see what that number is that you'll have. Right? It's a pretty fun number to look at. Okay. And so if you look at that, right, like because we built a hierarchy last month, y'all, and our hierarchy promoted a couple RVPs between the cash, bonuses, and stock, we were paid over $70,000 last month in like total compensation from a 19-year-old punk kid that took a year to get to district, right? And literally talked to a crap ton of people in 30 days and broke my foot walking, prospecting to people. Right? So it's like, if I can do it, you can do it. You just gotta be willing to pay the price and put the work in. Okay. So that's what I got for you, Dan, man. I'll open up for a couple questions if you want to, or whatever you want to do, man.
Yeah. Thanks. First off, man, thank you. Super grateful for you taking some time out here. I know I've been trying to figure out, I've been meaning to message you when we were going to do this. So I finally did that. So here we are. But you're going to be at the Builders School in October, right? The Midwest Builders School?
Yep.
Awesome. So he'll be at not like the next Michigan event, not the one in June, but the one after that. So he'll be speaking there, which is going to be awesome. So you guys get to meet him in person. Don't show up to that meeting not being an RVP. That's my challenge to the team right here, right? Like every single one, you said 6 months, right?
Yep.
Like every single one of these guys could be an RVP at
Absolutely.
that event if they made the decision. So if you have a few minutes, I'd love for them to be able to ask a few questions if that's all right with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So guys, raise your hand, hit the raise hand button, and then do your best to have your camera on if you can. I know some of you guys have babies, so no big deal if you're with the baby. But Morgan, go ahead. You be first.
My questions, my connection's a little spotty, so I do apologize. First question, you said you have your goal is to have at least 3 ways of prospecting. So like, would that be social media, in person? Like what are the avenues of prospecting?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's like I would find a few and just use whatever you can, right? Okay, so like right now for me, like one thing I do, right, if you look like since January, I've recruited like 30 directs in the last 4 months, right? Where did that come from? That literally came from like one of my ways is I send out 50 direct messages on Facebook every single day, right? Every single day, right? And guess whose message I use? I use Dan's. So I use your RVP's message, right? Which is what helped me recruit more directs in the last 4 months than I've ever recruited, right? That's the perks of like having cross-pollination like this, right? Number 2, I think that like, like you just need to always be friendship farming, right? Like, so everywhere you go, right? So like I'm a part of a CrossFit gym, right? That's probably why me and Dan get along pretty well, right? Since he owned a few of them, right? Of course, he could hate them now after that, right? But, so it's like, I'm a part of a CrossFit gym. My kids' school, I'm at the parent night tonight. So everywhere I go that I'm like, are in communities of people, like you should always be building relationships with those people there too, right? See, I'm a big believer, you got to have ways that you're going to get results immediately, and you got to be having ways that are going to be a little bit slower plays too, right? It's like the people at my CrossFit gym, the other parents of the kids at my kids' school, people at church, like that's more of a friendship farming. Like I'm building a relationship over time and I'll eventually get it. but the direct messages is stuff I can get every single day. And then on top of that, I mean, you just need to pick something, right? You know, whether it's going to networking events. That's where I found that Mason McDonald, right? Like, y'all check this out. So I lived in Tampa. I moved to Tampa in 2017 to expand my business. I knew nobody there. And so I did what I told you to do. And my 3 ways at that point were face-to-face prospecting, networking events, and social media. I went to a networking event, met a lady named Valerie. She referred me to her cousin named Michelle. Michelle took me on one field training appointment with a couple named Tim and Lisa Gutierrez. Tim and Lisa Gutierrez was the first RVP I promoted in Florida. And because I promoted Tim, his replacement's now an RVP, that replacement's an RVP, and I'm about to promote my 4th RVP from Tim because I went to one networking event and I got one referral. So you just never know who it's going to be though, right? So I would challenge you, like, you know, you could do networking events, you can use multiple ways on social media, right? Well, maybe instead of not only like Facebook messaging, right? Like I know Dan does LinkedIn, you can do Instagram, right? So you just got to find 3 that work. Like there's no magic 3 is my answer. Like just have 3 or 4 and do them consistently. But great question. And then.
Well, Amber, you go ahead. Elliot's question was literally the same thing. So that's why he put his hand down.
So I have a question. I haven't like burned through. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, that's like absolutely pouring rain here, so the connection's terrible. But so I haven't burned through like my market yet of like my contacts in my phone or like Facebook or anything. But when it gets to that point and you are out like just cold prospecting, and like how do you approach people without it being really awkward and be like, hi, do you want to buy life insurance? Because that's obviously not what you're going to say, you know?
Yeah.
Like, how do you just get their number first and just tell them like, hey, I'd like to introduce you to something that, or do you just go ahead and like, just go for it? Like, how do you?
So I'll tell you what, here's my coaching. Obviously, like if anything I ever say is different from what Dan tells you to do what Dan tells you to do. Okay. Because you're running his system. Okay. So number 1, I believe you never run out of people to talk to in your warm market. Because number 1, like most people, when they think of their warm market, what they think about is their hot market. You're typically thinking of people that you talk to like on the regular, right? Like, you know, there's probably like 10 to maybe 15 people on your phone that you text message pretty frequently. Okay. But in reality, your warm market is anybody that you know, or anybody that knows you or knows of you. Okay. And so what does that mean, right? So like whenever I got started, a couple of the appointments I did up here in Indianapolis was I didn't know people in Indianapolis. And so I needed people in my market, but I was in a fraternity. Okay. And so I started asking all of my fraternity brothers who were from the area, hey, do you think your parents would be willing to sit down with me and help me out? And they were like, yeah, I bet they do that. And so I was like, hey, can you give me their number? And can you give them a heads up? I'm going to be calling. So then I would get Dan's parents' number, and I'd be like, hey, Bob and Susan, hey, you don't know me, but I'm actually a fraternity brother of your son, Dan. Like, did he give you a heads up? I'll be giving you a call. And they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. So I instantly have credibility, and they're now in my warm market because I get to borrow that credibility, right? Or I would call people and say like, hey, like you don't know me, but I'm actually Brad and Kelly Zimmerly's son. My parents were super involved in our community. And so they knew of me through my parents, if that makes sense, right? So I would challenge you. And so there's a great audio. It's called How to Build a 1,000 Name List. That's where you need to start. Okay, it's How to Build a 1,000 Name List. I believe you can find it on SoundCloud. It's actually, I believe the audio I have, it's actually Nate Braley who's teaching on it. Okay, one of your guys' uplines. Okay, so it's actually your senior vice president that is in the audio. Okay, and so he talks about like how to build a 1,000 name list of people that you know or know you, right? And that sounds really hard, but it's not. Here's what you do, right? Step number 1, you grab your phone, you start at A, and you write down every single person in your phone, A to Z. Step number 2, Amber, are you married or in a significant relationship at all?
Yeah.
Okay. Step number 2, you take your significant other's phone, you then open that up and you go A to Z. Most people can get almost 1,000 right there. If you can't get 1,000 right there, step number 3, you go to your Facebook. You start at A, go to Z, right? And if you still don't have 1,000, you go to your significant other's Facebook and you go from A and go to Z, and you will have 1,000 people. Now, will you have all of their numbers? No, but you got to get like, hey, you are like, entrepreneurs are paid so much money because you are work creators, not work processors. So you get creative, right? So guess what I started doing, Amber? I had a bunch of people like I knew I could talk to, but I didn't have their numbers. So then what I would do is I would say, okay, who else do I know that has that person's number? And I would call Morgan and be like, hey, Morgan, hey, what's up? Hey, listen, I was trying to reach out to Tammy and man, I thought I had her number, but I didn't. Like, you have it though, right? Yeah, I got it. Can you text that to me? Thanks. Right. And then all of a sudden, boom, I have another number. So you're going to have to put some work into it, right? But it's like, you can get that 1,000 name list. Okay. So you need to start there. Okay. Then your goal is to like, never let it go below 1,000. How do you do that? That's where like, you know, like I was saying, like having multiple ways, but one of your, like an easy way to prospect people if you're out and about, right, is you all interact with people on a weekly basis, monthly basis, just in your day-to-day life, right? So let's say that you and your significant other, Amber, you guys go out to dinner, you go on a date, and you go to a place that has where you have a server. So I was a server before Primerica. My top paid RVP who makes 300 grand a year, she was a server as well. Servers do pretty well here, okay? And so you're out to dinner, you have a server who's actually doing a good job, and you're like, man, I think they do pretty well here. I want to get their number. What do I do? You wait till the very end until you're about to leave. That is critical, because if you ask them at the beginning, they will then ask you like 50,000 questions and like, number one, they'll be really annoying and it'll mess up. And then we ain't playing 20 questions. Okay. So right before you leave, you say, hey, I got a question for you. Amber, like, do you see yourself doing this forever, or would you be keeping your options open? And the key word in that phrase is forever, right? Which, by the way, guess who I got that from? That's an Ian Pruckner one. Okay. So hey, do you see yourself doing this forever, or do you keep your options open? Most of the time they'll say, yeah, I keep my options open. Okay, great. Hey, let me text you my info. So that way you have it and you know I'm calling. Well, what's the only way you can text me your info, Amber? Is I have to give you my number, right? Now, what do you do if they say, well, what is it? You look at them kind of cocky and you go, it's not this. And then, because why? Broke and skeptical is a dangerous combo, right? So if you're at Subway and you're prospecting the cashier, is there anything wrong with those people? No, we're all God's people, but like, what are they really making, right? Like, they're not making a whole lot, right? Or if they're the person at the gas station or wherever you're at, right? And most of the time, if they ask, well, what is it? And you go, it ain't this, they go, yeah, you're right. And then they give you the number, right? And if they ask another and they're still skeptical, hey, you know what? It's probably not a good fit. Best of luck to you. And you walk away, right? So that's kind of, so that's how I tell you how to build a list to make sure you don't run out of people, but then also when you're out and about, okay? So like, that's what I would tell you. So yeah, great question.
We'll do one more. Morgan, go ahead. Last question, because we'll let Tyler go to bed.
Okay, thank you. So just about like the limiting beliefs and stuff like that, just like believing like you're not good enough or you're not gonna like see the results no matter like how much work you put in, blah blah blah. I know you said just like outwork everyone on the team and whatnot, but is there any like books or audios or anything that like really helped you with that?
Yeah, great question. So let me, so a couple things, right? So number one is, again, like you got to be willing to put the work in and you got to give yourself undeniable proof, right? But another thing that's going to help you with limiting beliefs is, again, you got to get to these big events, right? Like the Tampa event, the one in Michigan. Why? Because you get to big events and you are going to see so many people winning from so many different walks of life that if you are like, competitive at all, right? You're going to be like, okay, like that person is seriously ugly and they make a lot of money here. Like if they can do it, I can do it, right? Now, obviously I'm being a little facetious, okay? But it's like, you're just going to see so many people that you're like, okay, like this is just, it's not like, oh, only this type of person wins or only that. Like you're going to see people from every walk of life and you're like, and you'll eventually see someone that you relate with that came from your background and you're like, oh shoot, well they can do it, I can do it. Okay, so that's number one. Okay, but then number two, a couple of books to kind of help you overcome limiting beliefs. Yeah, Dan put one of the best ones in the chat, which is called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Dr. Shad Helmstetter. Number two is Ian's book, Byproducts, right? Like I think that is a must read for every person in Primerica. Okay, because it's like you get Ian, who has made his money first in our business, and then he took all these other books and like whittled them all down to like, here's what you actually need to do. And then a third book that I think is really good just for you to understand like what it's going to look like on your path towards success is a book called The Dream Giver by Bruce Wilkinson. So freaking good, right? It's a story, so it's really easy to read, but it's just going to walk you through like what's it going to, and this, and in any endeavor, right? In any endeavor, right? And so I think those are a couple things that can really help you overcome limiting beliefs. I think those are really good ones, but yeah, great question.
Awesome. Well, dude, thank you so much for jumping on here. We always talk about that Dream Giver book. I love that book.
Yeah.
I found it actually through I think it was actually a Shane Rudman audio.
Okay.
Where he was reading portions of the book. I was like, I got to get this book. It's so good.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
But yeah, so guys, Tyler, I believe you said you should be a national sales director, right? By the time we get to the thing in October, or SNSD.
That's the plan. Yeah. National sales director is the plan. We're already running the numbers. We just got to get the RVPs out. So
yeah, that's awesome, guys. So he's on a run right now. Like I said, we get to hang out a little bit every Monday. And so it's cool to see just the growth happening there and being able to be like a little bit in the trenches with him. And so guys, give it up for Tyler in the chat. If you can, guys, you'll see him in about 6 months at the Builder School. But Tyler, thanks so much, man. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely. And guys, biggest thing I would tell you is like literally every Monday, my goal is like to just try to keep up with Dan and the number of appointments that he does, right? So like you're following the right dude, okay? So if you'll just like do like a fraction of what Dan's doing, you will crush it here. You will become an RVP and you're going to make big money, okay? So I wish I would have had a leader that was that on it whenever I got recruited, okay? Because I didn't have that, right? So seriously, like you guys are with the right person. It was a ton of fun. Hope it helps, guys. Have a great night and go